So welcome to March 18th, 2020. On March 18th, 2020, on my little Facebook page, because I wasn't on Twitter doing this yet, I posted this. Can we please remember that infection numbers will go up in the coming days because we've actually started widespread testing? And it's not because hundreds are suddenly catching the virus in real time. Stay safe, be logical. Yes, I realize that the hashtags don't really do much on Facebook, especially if your posts aren't totally public. The testing, this was something that we all wanted early, right? And I remember in January, this is where my mind was at. Like, hey, if we can test for this virus, we can sort of figure it out. We can track it better. And it kind of points to how naive most of us are on all of these points, testing, treatment, diagnosis, blah, blah, blah. I think we've all learned that these things, these medical science things that we quasi lay people, and again, I have exposure to the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry. I've worked in with those a lot in my career. Not an expert, but I know the lay of the land. I know more than the average bear about this sort of stuff. But even for me, I latched onto the idea of testing in January. I was following the fact that our CDC had said no to the South Korean tests. I was under the impression that they said no to the South Korean tests because they were loose. And I understood that. And I'm not a fan of the CDC. I think that they've done more harm than good here overall, honestly. But the reason that I understood that they had declined the South Korean tests were because the test had a high error rate, both on the positive and negative side. And if you look at a population like the United States and you mass produce a test that is not super precise, it can very quickly cause issues, right? You can have millions of people potentially who get a false positive and think that they have the virus. You could argue that that's maybe better safe than sorry. I would argue that that's probably not helpful. Again, bad information, erroneous information is no bueno. We don't want that. And then on the other side, you might have people that take a test and get a false negative and then run out and super spread, right? So all that in the background, this is the moment in time where ramped up testing and amped up testing came online in New York. We're going to see a huge spike, right, in cases. And at this point, we knew that this virus, and this is mid-March, guys, we knew that this virus had a super duper high rate of mild and asymptomatic infections. We knew that, okay? You can look at that and consider that a really bad thing. But the rest of us looked at that and said, wow, that's good. Because if you believe in natural immunity, and it's not that you want people to get sick, right? Look, let's just dispense with that urban legend or that honestly politicized angle on this immediately, okay? Because when you look at data, right, that says that there are, the vast majority of cases of COVID, honestly, throughout the entire demographic spectrum, are mild and or asymptomatic. Again, that's a good thing. Is the virus a good thing? No. If you understand natural immunity, right? If somebody catches this thing, somebody who is, again, across the demographic spectrum, right? And they have a completely asymptomatic case. And again, understanding what an asymptomatic case is, that's literally no symptoms. It's not mild symptoms, okay? It's not symptoms that you think are an allergy or symptoms that you think are a cold. Asymptomatic means no symptoms. And we knew early on that this thing does not spread with no symptoms. It spreads with mild symptoms. It spreads with very mild symptoms. But it doesn't spread with zero symptoms. And there are a lot of cases where people just do not get symptoms. It comes in their body kung fu's it, kills the virus, and establishes a degree of immunity. We do know the immunity is stronger and more lasting naturally if you get a more severe case, right? I mean, that's not ideal. It's a bit of a trade-off. But again, this testing, right? Launching this testing at this point, I saw the potential to create a problem. And I think that we have seen that exact problem still to this day, right? CNN writing the case numbers, trumpeting the fact that, oh my God, there's millions of cases. Sober, logical, reasonable adults looking at this thing understand that cases are not the same thing as deaths. It's a metric. It's a semi-useful tool for measuring sort of the spread of the virus. But we even knew at this point that these tests were not super duper accurate. They just didn't have these tests locked down. They still don't. These are PCR tests. And if you read anything about PCR tests, all it is a magnification of viral particles. And they were, even at that time, they were cranking up the cycles to like 30, 40 times. And this is, magnifying, bits of virus. And, we do know that a lot of the positives are people that actually had these asymptomatic cases, right? Got better. These are residual virus pieces in their body. They're not positive people, right? And here we are, even at this point in March, ramping up the testing. I looked at this and I said, wait a second. Our society I could feel it. We were about to completely lose our minds and completely freak out and completely give into fear. And here we had these tests coming online. And even as somebody who wanted testing, I mean, who doesn't want testing? But again, you have to use your tool and understand what the tool is for. Just like the PCR tests, like the tests themselves. The tests themselves are a tool, right? They can be used certain ways. They can be used other ways. They can be misinterpreted. They can be, the test itself can be, sort of overblown, misused. Although I think that they would argue that the test isn't misused. They're they're misinterpreting the results, or they're abusing the results. Again, with the best of intentions, right? And we saw this coming up to this, that, people with great intentions, right? What was that? There's a saying about that, about good intentions. I wonder what that saying is. But the idea that we were going to vastly increase testing, to the casual observer, who again is trying to stay fair, logical, reasoned, sober, read everything they can, you can easily understand how ramping up testing without proper context could become a problem. And that was the point of this post. And I think that we saw throughout the year, and we'll definitely come back to this, that the increase in testing with these loose tests, these misinterpreted tests, made things exponentially worse.